As I've been diligently doing my Games of the Year homework, I finally got around to playing Dispatch, and wow, it really blew me away. I love it when games crash headfirst into other mediums and we get a kind of mutant amalgam. It feels like something fresh and new for games. It's what made Immortality the cinematic masterpiece, my Game of the Year in 2022. It was like art house cinema that you get to play on your screen, and it really was like nothing that I've ever played before. And that's a feeling that I got playing Dispatch 2, in a very different way of course. It's an episodic visual novel that's taken the world by storm. It's sold 2 million units in 2 months and it has a Metacritic 89, making it one of the highest rated games of the year. Visual novels don't usually trouble the mainstream to that degree, but this one really has, and it's become an instant classic in the genre, and might just be one of the best visual novels ever made. As always, your likes are appreciated. You can sub to the channel for more like this. Join the Patreon if you would like a free game code for Ultros, 1000 Times Resist, Citizen Sleeper, or In Other Waters. Let me know about your favourite visual novel in the comments. I would love to hear from you. And with that, let's get into Dispatch. So let's start at the start. Dispatch has got a fascinating development story. It's the first project of Ad Hoc, a studio started by 4 former Telltale, Night School, and Ubisoft developers. It started off as a live-action project. There is no information about whether that means a TV show or a live-action game with actors, but either way, production was abruptly cancelled when the pandemic hit, when filming was illegal basically. But the project was revived some years later, this time as an animated, voice-acted video game project, and I'm really glad that it was, for one. It took a few years to make, and then it was released like a serial, with 2 episodes dropping at a time over the course of a month, and much like I do with TV shows, I waited until the end, until they were all out, and then binged them over the course of a week. I really can't stand waiting for a new episode on the edge of my seat. I think streaming culture has ruined me that way. But I was blown away by the game's overall quality, the bright, fresh art, the amazing voice acting, and I found it funny, gripping, and thrilling. The script is whip sharp, and it's a near-perfect synthesis of animated TV show and game. I do have a few caveats on the formula that I'll get to at the end, but first of all, let's talk about what it's like to play Dispatch. The game begins with a cool action sequence in which you play the mechanized superhero Mecha Man, who is basically like a walking space marine mech suit. But when the suit is destroyed by arch-villain the Shroud, you just become a guy called Robert. And when you're at your most down and out, you're recruited by the beautiful Supergirl-esque blonde Blazer to start working as a dispatcher at a superhero dispatch agency. The agency, it turns out, is like a private security company and response team who reply to calls that are phoned in by clients. Everything from a cat in a tree to a tower block fire to a supervillain on the rampage. But it turns out that the heroes at the agency aren't exactly the best and the brightest. They're like a very messed up X-Man family without the wholesome Professor X setting the vibe. And it's a bit more like a superhero Lord of the Flies. And on top of all that, you're put in charge of the Z-Team, a group of former villains who are trying and failing to make a fresh start. You will have to wrangle them and you will get to know them all, and it's a brilliant cast of misfits that you're dealing with, from Sonar, a wisecracking stoner bat guy, to Coop, a masked, sinister, knife-throwing assassin who can fly, to Flambe, a literally combustible pyrotechnician, and Invisigal, who can turn invisible, but only as long as she can hold her breath. I was also a big fan of Golem, who's like a mellow The Thing. He's like a walking cliffside who's often found moping outside of meeting rooms that he can't fit through the door of. And it's your job to try and wrangle these big personalities and these dysfunctional beings and to make the team work. This unfolds in 2 types of gameplay. Each chapter has a dispatch section. This is the gameplay portion of the game. Sitting at his desk and looking through Robert's eyes, you see a map of the city on his monitor. You take calls and you try and match the right hero to the job. For example, a charismatic hero for a speaking engagement, or a combat brute to take down a violent gang, and how well you choose the hero affects the outcome, sometimes with comedic effect if you do it badly, and it's down to you to intuit which hero is best. They sometimes have twists, so you might send a charismatic person who ends up in a brawl and you might fail that mission, and you can sometimes send 2 or 3 heroes, but that leaves you short-handed if another call should come in, so there's some strategy to it as well. Successes means that you can power up the various disciplines of your heroes to make them more powerful. You can either specialize them or generalize them, almost like a deck builder. And I think my favorite thing about this is that the heroes wisecrack and chat and bicker as you dispatch them. Their voices crackle over the radio, and it made these sections really enjoyable that they all have this cool interplay going on as you try and do your work. There are also hacking sections where you have to do a fairly dry puzzle-based mini-game to try and open a door or to turn on a security camera. The less said about those, the better, honestly, but generally I really enjoyed the dispatching sections. It was a good way to get to know my team. It illustrates the dynamics that you're going to have to work with, and it's a pretty good little gameplay section that keeps things ticking over nicely. Then there are the visual novel sections, which are beautifully directed scenes where the characters will chat, fight, flirt, joke around in the office, go out for a drink, and these are packed with one-liners and they're never boring. The dialogue is snappy and fun, the relationships are really good to get to know, and there are dialogue choices with notifications like Invisigal will remember that, which pops up on the screen, letting you know that something consequential just happened, although you're not exactly sure what the consequences are, which I will return to later. There are also QTEs that you can turn on or off based on whether you like them. It was off for me, but people who have played said they add something to the action sequences, and it's basically like watching an interactive Netflix show, and a really good one at that. There are cold opens and cliffhangers, sight gags and risque jokes, crazy takes on office politics, and some surprisingly human stories woven in here too. The various characters are all dealing with ideas around identity, guilt, redemption, and responsibility, so you really will get some favorites and feel like you're taking on a project. And all in all, the pacing and the framing are perfect throughout, and it's just entirely entertaining. The whole thing really transports you into this world. I really tuned out of the real world and just enjoyed what I was seeing on my screen. But that brings us to the few downsides that I have to talk about when it comes to Dispatch. I've already mentioned the lackluster hacking minigame, which I could have lived without, to be honest. It's just busy work and too simplistic to be fun. But the big one for me is cause and effect. Sometimes in conversation, you will be told that something you've said will be remembered by one person or the group, and there are apparently some quite divergent outcomes in this game based on those choices. But I had no idea what I'd done to influence anything during my playthrough, which meant I felt more like a passenger than an active participant at times. It made me think of games that have handled this better. My personal two favourites are Detroit Become Human, which literally shows you a flowchart at the end of each chapter, so you're very clear on what decisions you took that precipitated the events you're seeing on screen. I also think about Gerda, A Flame in Winter, a lesser-known choice-based game by Dontnod set in Nazi-occupied Denmark. It handles choice beautifully. Various people and factions have affinity meters, so you can be very intentional about who you trust, who you humour, who you try and reel in, and who you try and play, and it really matters as the story progresses. Dispatch has none of that really. You do get a little chart at the end of each chapter that tells you how many other people chose the path that you took. Mine varied from, 90% down to 10%, so I made some popular choices and some really unpopular ones, but I'm really none the wiser about how what I did mattered, apart from in a very vague sense. I guess you're supposed to intuit it, but honestly it came as a surprise to me to hear after credits that there are different endings at all. So I wish the game had done a better job of making me feel directly involved and making my decisions feel impactful in what I was seeing on the screen. I will say for the record, this is the first Telltale type game I've played, so do let me know in the comments if there's a Telltale game that handles it better that I should try, because I do wonder if they've handled it differently or handled it better before. But those quibbles aside, I think this is probably an 8.5 or a 9 out of 10 for me personally. I really enjoyed it. I really looked forward to my Dispatch episode at the end of a long day, and I think it's probably my favourite visual novel ever. High praise indeed. You can check it out on PlayStation 5 and Steam. That's Dispatch. And if you're one of the real ones who listened all the way to the end of the video, I want to tell you briefly about the Patreon, but before you click away or press pause or go to another video, listen up for just a second, because I have game codes to give to new patrons, and it starts at just $1 a month. I have loads of codes for 1000 Times Resist on Steam or PlayStation 5. I have Steam codes for Ultros, a very influential game on this channel, and a game that I literally wrote the book about for lostincult.co.uk, and for Citizen Sleeper and Gareth Damian Martin's first ever game, In Other Waters. You also get access to more than 20 bonus podcast episodes and our patron Discord server, which is a wonderful little walled garden in the gamer internet where you can talk to like-minded indie game fans, discover new games, and make some friends maybe too. It's patreon.com/gaminginthewild. Head over there and have a look, link on the screen now, and a special thank you to my boss tier patrons ShyGuy, KingChamp, Cerys, SusannaMaria, Nate, and Syd B. You guys really support this channel. You help me to make more videos and podcasts for everyone to listen to, so thanks very much. And with that, take care of yourselves and each other, and I'll see you on the next one.